Redemption, Texas, August 1883. Behind a bar stood Thomas Kellerman, a man of perhaps 50 years, though his lined face suggested he'd lived twice that many lives. He moved with an economy of motion born from 15 years of tending bar in Redemption, polishing glasses with methodical precision, his pale blue eyes focused on his work. His hair, once black as a crow's wing, had gone steel gray, and he wore it long enough to brush his collar. A neatly trimmed mustache gave him a distinguished air that seemed at odds with his profession. The locals knew Tom as a man of few words and fewer smiles. He kept his counsel, minded his business, and ran the cleanest establishment in 3 counties. He neither gossiped nor judged, which made the Silver Dollar the preferred watering hole for ranchers, drifters, and the occasional respectable citizen alike. What he'd been before arriving in Redemption was a mystery he'd never cared to illuminate. The saloon's doors swung open with a violent crash, and 4 men shouldered their way inside. Even without the guns slung low on their hips, they would have announced themselves as trouble. The Cassidy brothers, Jake, Frank, and Cole, along with their cousin, a half-breed called Cherokee Bill, had been terrorizing the territory for the better part of 6 months. They had robbed the stage line up in Abilene, shot a sheriff's deputy in Cold Creek, and were rumored to have burned out a family of homesteaders who'd refused to sell their land. Jake Cassidy, the eldest at 28, swaggered to the bar with the confidence of a man who'd never met meaningful resistance. He was handsome in a cruel way, with dark eyes that seemed to calculate the cost of everything and the value of nothing. His brothers flanked him like faithful hounds, while Cherokee Bill hung back by the door, his hand resting casually on his pistol. "Whiskey!" Jake announced, slapping the bar hard enough to make the glasses rattle. "Your best bottle, old man. We're celebrating." Tom reached for the bottle of decent rye. Not the rot gut he served to drunks, but not the expensive Kentucky bourbon he kept for special occasions either. He poured 4 fingers into a glass and slid it across the polished wood. Jake picked up the glass, sniffed it, and then spat on the floor. "I said your best bottle. You deaf or just stupid?" Tom's expression didn't change. "That's good whiskey. 4 bits a glass." "4 bits?" Frank Cassidy laughed, younger by 2 years and meaner by twice that. "You hear that, boys? This worn-out barkeep thinks he can charge us premium prices." "Maybe he don't know who we are," Cole offered. At 23, he was the youngest and the most eager to prove himself. "Maybe we need to educate him."
Tom simply stood there, his hands resting flat on the bar, meeting their eyes with a steady gaze that betrayed nothing. The other patrons, 2 ranch hands and a traveling salesman, had gone quiet, sensing the shift in the air the way animals sense an approaching storm. "You know what I think?" Jake leaned across the bar, close enough that Tom could smell the trail dust and sweat on him. "I think you're just another broken-down old man playing at being something. Look at you, gray as a ghost. Hands probably shake so bad you can't even pour straight. How'd a pathetic old bastard like you end up serving drinks in this shithouse town?" Tom reached for the glass Jake had rejected and poured the whiskey back into the bottle with a steady hand. "That'll be 4 bits for the one you spat out." The saloon erupted in laughter from the Cassidy gang, but it was the laughter of wolves, not men. 4 bits? Jake's hand dropped to his gun. "Old man, the only thing you're getting from me is a lesson in respect." "Jake's right," Frank chimed in. "Maybe we ought to teach all these folks what happens when you don't show proper deference to your betters." He drew his pistol and fired into the ceiling, sending splinters of wood raining down. The ranch hands bolted for the door, nearly knocking over the salesmen in their haste. Cherokee Bill stepped aside to let them pass, grinning. Tom didn't flinch at the gunshot. He simply stood there, a slight frown creasing his weathered features. "That's gonna need fixin'," he said quietly. "That's gonna need fixin'," Frank mimicked in a whining voice. "Jesus, Jake, where'd they find this one? He's about as exciting as a funeral." Jake studied Tom with renewed interest, the way a cat studies a mouse that stopped running. "You know what I think? I think our friend here needs to learn some manners. Get on your knees, old man. Beg us real pretty, and maybe we won't burn this place down around your ears." Tom's pale eyes moved from Jake to Frank to Cole, then briefly to Cherokee Bill by the door. The silence stretched out like a rope pulling taut. "You boys will get one chance from me," Tom said, his voice carrying across the room despite its quietness. "Finish your drinks. Pay what you owe. Walk out that door. Go find trouble somewhere else." For a moment, Jake seemed genuinely shocked. Then his face darkened with rage. Did this old fool just threaten us?" "I believe he did," Frank said, his voice pitched with dangerous delight. "I believe this broke-down barkeep just gave us an ultimatum." Cole drew his gun and pointed it at Tom's chest. "Mister, you just made the last mistake of your life." "Maybe," Tom acknowledged. His hands hadn't moved from the bar. "But I'm giving you the chance to walk away. Most men don't get that courtesy." "Most men?" Jake laughed. "Old-timer, you keep talking like you're somebody. But I look at you and all I see is another washed-up nobody. Hell, I bet you've never even fired a gun. I bet those shaky old hands couldn't even hit the broadside of a barn."
"Used to could," Tom said simply. "Used to could," Frank hooted. "Listen to him. Used to could. When was that, Grandpa? Back when you had teeth? Before your balls shriveled up?" Cherokee Bill spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a trace of an accent. "Jake, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Bill." Jake's eyes never left Tom. "I want to see what this old man's got in him. See if there's any sand beneath all that gray hair." He drew his own pistol, a Colt Peacemaker that gleamed with recent care. "Tell you what, Grandpa, you apologize for threatening us. Get down on your knees and lick my boots clean, and maybe, just maybe, we'll let you keep breathing." The traveling salesman had edged toward the door, but Cherokee Bill blocked his path with one extended arm. Tom looked at the guns pointed at him, then down at his hands on the bar. When he spoke, his voice was tinged with something that might have been sadness. 15 years I've kept the peace in this place. Never raised my voice, never raised my hand. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet long enough, the past would stay buried." "What the hell's he muttering about?" Cole asked. 15 years, Tom repeated, and now there was a new quality to his voice, harder, like stone under silk. "Last chance. Walk away." Jake's response was to cock his pistol. "I'm going to count to 3, and then I'm gonna—" He never finished the sentence. Tom moved. It happened faster than the eye could follow, faster than thought itself. One moment his hands were flat on the bar. The next, he dropped below the bar line, and when he came up, he held a pistol in each hand. Twin Colt 45s with worn grips and barrels that had seen more use than any gun in that room. The first shot took Jake Cassidy in the chest before his brain could process what was happening. The second caught Frank between the eyes as he tried to turn. Cole managed to pull his trigger, but his shot went wide, and Tom's bullet found his heart with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Cherokee Bill was faster than his cousins, and he got off a shot that splintered the bar inches from Tom's head. But Tom's return fire was faster still, and twice as accurate. Bill staggered backward through the saloon doors and collapsed in the street. The 4 shots had sounded almost like one extended thunderclap. The entire exchange had taken perhaps 3 seconds.
Gunsmoke hung in the air like morning fog. Tom stood behind the bar, the pistol still in his hands, looking down at the 3 bodies crumpled on his floor. His face showed no satisfaction, no rage, no fear, only a deep, bone-weary resignation. The salesman was pressed against the wall, his eyes wide as saucers, his mouth working soundlessly. Tom looked at him and spoke in that same quiet voice he'd used to serve drinks. "You'll want to fetch Sheriff Crawford. Tell him there's been trouble at the Silver Dollar." You, the salesman stammered. "You're him! Sweet Jesus! You're Thomas Kellerman, the devil's disciple! I thought you were dead!" Tom set the pistols on the bar with gentle care. "I was. For 15 years I was." The salesman fled, and Tom was alone with the dead. He walked around the bar and knelt beside Jake Cassidy, closing the man's eyes with surprising tenderness. He did the same for Frank and Cole. Then he stepped outside to check on Cherokee Bill, but there was nothing to be done. The man had died with his eyes open, staring at the brutal Texas sky. By the time Sheriff Henry Crawford arrived with his deputy, half the town had gathered outside the Silver Dollar. Crawford was a good man, honest and fair, with 20 years of keeping the peace under his belt. He took in the scene with a practiced eye, then looked at Tom standing in the doorway. "Tom," he said carefully. "Henry, these the Cassidy boys?" "They are." Crawford stepped over Cherokee Bill's body and entered the saloon. He studied the positions of the bodies, the placement of the bullet holes, the untouched whiskey bottle on the bar. When he emerged, his face was troubled. "They drew on you?" "They did. Witnesses will tell you the same." "I imagine they will." Crawford removed his hat and wiped his brow. "Tom, I've known you 15 years. Never seen you so much as raise your voice. Now I got 4 dead men, and each of 'em shot cleaner than a military execution. Want to tell me what's going on?" Tom looked past the sheriff at the gathered crowd. He saw familiar faces, men and women he'd served drinks to, shared quiet words with, existed alongside for a decade and a half. They were looking at him differently now. Not with fear exactly, but not with the comfortable disregard they'd shown the quiet bartender.
Jesse was smarter than most. They said you disappeared after the war. Some claimed you'd been killed by bounty hunters. Others said you'd gone to Mexico or California. Crawford studied Tom with new eyes. Never occurred to anyone you might be tending bar in Redemption, Texas. That was the idea. A woman pushed through the crowd, Martha Henderson, who owned the general store. She was 55, widowed, and had been sweet on Tom for years, though he'd never encouraged her. "Tom, you saved this town. The Cassidy gang would have torn through here like locusts. You're a hero." Tom's expression didn't change. "I'm a killer, Martha. I was trying not to be, but that's what I am." "You defended yourself," Crawford said. "Clear case of self-defense. No jury in the world would convict you." "Don't reckon I'm worried about juries, Henry." "Then what are you worried about?" Tom looked at his hands, the same hands that had polished glasses and poured drinks for 15 years, the same hands that had just killed 4 men with the casual efficiency of a man swatting flies. "Worried I found out I'm still good at it. Worried how easy it was. Worried that some part of me missed it." Crawford opened his mouth to respond, but a new voice cut across the street. "Thomas Kellerman!" The crowd parted to reveal a young man, perhaps 25, wearing a gun belt with silver conchos. He was tall and lean, with the kind of pretty boy good looks that mothers worry and daughters swoon. But his eyes held the flat, predatory gleam of a rattlesnake. "I'm Wade Dalton," the young man announced. "Maybe you've heard of me." Crawford cursed under his breath. Tom's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. "I've heard," Tom said. "You've killed 6 men, all of 'em face to face, all of 'em supposedly fair." Wade smiled, showing too many teeth. "7, as of last week.
Shot a card-sharp in Amarillo who thought he could cheat me, but that's not why I'm here." He stepped over Cherokee Bill's corpse without looking down. "I'm here because for 3 years I've been building a reputation, and now I find out the man they called the Devil's Discipline is alive and tending bar 20 miles from where I was born. Kind of embarrassing for me, you understand? Makes me look like I've been playing in the shallow end of the pool." "I'm not that man anymore," Tom said. "Really? Because from where I'm standing, you just put down 4 armed men in about as many seconds. Seems to me you're exactly that man." Wade's hand hovered near his pistol. "Here's how this is going to work. You and me, we're going to settle who's fastest. Right here, right now. And when I put you down, my reputation will be set for life. I'll be the man who killed the Devil's Discipline."
"Son, I'm 52 years old. I haven't drawn on a man in 17 years before today. You really want your reputation built on killing an old bartender? I want my reputation built on killing the fastest gun who ever lived. Age doesn't matter. You just proved that." Tom looked at Sheriff Crawford, who stood helpless and angry. The law was clear. If 2 men agreed to duel, and it was conducted fairly, there wasn't much the law could do. And if Tom refused, Wade would shoot him where he stood and claim self-defense. "Give me 10 minutes," Tom said. "Let me settle my affairs." Wade laughed. "You mean write a will?" "Sure, old man. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." Tom walked back into the Silver Dollar. He moved through the blood and the bodies to the bar, where he poured himself 2 fingers of that expensive Kentucky bourbon he saved for special occasions. He drank it slowly, savoring the burn, remembering. There'd been a woman once in Kansas. Mary, her name was. Dark-haired and fierce, with a laugh that could light up a room. She'd made him promise to give up the gun, to be a better man. He'd promised, and he'd meant it. But then the war came, and after the war came the men who'd lost everything and blamed everyone. He'd killed to protect her, killed to avenge her when protection wasn't enough, killed until killing was all he knew. He'd ridden away from her grave with nothing but the clothes on his back and the guns on his hips. He'd drifted for 2 years, drawn on any man stupid enough to challenge him, until the weight of all those bodies had become unbearable. So he'd buried Thomas Kellerman and become Tom the Bartender. A quiet man, a peaceful man. But the gun remembered, even if he'd tried to forget. He finished the bourbon and walked back outside. The sun was lower now, painting the street in shades of amber and blood. Wade Dalton stood ready, his hand loose and relaxed, his stance perfect. I could see immediately that the boy had talent, real talent. In another life he might have been truly dangerous. But this was this life, and Tom had been born dangerous. "Sheriff, you'll bear witness this was fair?" "I will." "Martha, you'll see the silver dollar goes to good hands. Maybe the church could use it. Sell the liquor, use the building for something decent." "Tom, you don't have to do this," Martha said, tears streaming down her face. "Actually, I do. If I don't, you'll kill someone else to draw me out, probably someone innocent." I looked at Wade. "Ready?" "Been ready." Wade was grinning now, loose and confident. They stood 30 feet apart in the middle of the street. The crowd had pulled back to the buildings on either side, giving them room. The world seemed to hold its breath. "On 3, Crawford called out, his voice heavy. 1.
Wade drew. He was fast, faster than the Cassidy brothers, faster than most men Tom had faced. His hand was a blur, his Colt clearing leather with practiced ease. He would have killed most men before they'd twitched. But Tom was already moving. His draw was economical, efficient, refined over decades into something approaching art. There was no wasted motion, No unnecessary flourish. One moment his gun was holstered, the next it was in his hand, level and steady. Both men fired. Wade's shot went wide by perhaps 3 inches, tearing through the space where Tom's head had been a fraction of a second earlier. Tom had moved, not much, just enough, as he drew. Tom's shot took Wade Dalton in the center of his chest, right above the silver belt buckle he wore. The young man stood for a moment, looking down at the red flower blooming across his white shirt. His gun slipped from nerveless fingers. He looked up at Tom with an expression of profound confusion. "You're," he whispered, "you're still—" He fell forward into the dust and lay still. Tom walked over and knelt beside him, checking for a pulse he knew wouldn't be there. Wade's eyes were still open, still surprised. Tom closed them gently. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You were good. In a few more years, you might have been great. But you picked the wrong old man to prove yourself against." He stood and looked at Sheriff Crawford. "I'll be leaving town now, Henry. Now, you won't see me again." "Tom, you don't have to run. This was self-defense, same as the others." "Maybe, but there'll be another after him, and another after that. Word's gonna spread that the devil's disciple is alive. Every young gun from here to California is gonna come looking for me. I won't bring that down on redemption." He walked back into the Silver Dollar one last time. He retrieved his twin Colts from behind the bar, along with a small canvas bag he'd kept hidden for 15 years, the emergency fund he'd never touched, still containing the money he'd arrived with all those years ago. He took one last look around the saloon that had been his sanctuary and his prison. When he emerged, he was wearing his guns for the first time in 17 years. The weight of them on his hips felt both foreign and familiar, like putting on old clothes that still fit perfectly. Martha Henderson stepped forward. "Where will you go?" "North, maybe, or west. Somewhere they haven't heard the stories yet. Find another town, another name." He smiled for the first time that day, though there was no joy in it. "Maybe I'll be a store clerk this time, or a liveryman. Anything but a bartender. Will you ever be able to stop running?"
Tom looked at the 5 bodies in the street, the Cassidy gang and Wade Dalton, all dead by his hand in one brutal afternoon. "No," he said honestly, "I don't think I will. That's the price of being the fastest. You're only the fastest until someone faster comes along, and they always come along." He touched the brim of his hat to Martha, nodded to Sheriff Crawford, and began walking toward the livery stable. The crowd parted before him like the Red Sea before Moses, and he could feel their eyes on his back, awed, frightened, reverent. Behind him, redemption began the work of burying its dead and cleaning up the blood. Ahead of him lay the endless road, another town, another name, another attempt to be someone other than what he was. But as he saddled his horse, a mare named Grace he'd owned for 8 years and who'd never known him as anything but gentle, Tom understood the fundamental truth he'd been avoiding for 15 years. You couldn't outrun what you were. You could only choose how to be it. He rode north as the sun set, painting the Texas sky in shades of crimson and gold. Behind him, redemption faded into the gathering darkness. Ahead of him lay uncertainty, danger, and the cold comfort of knowing he was still the fastest gun in the West. But speed, Tom knew, was just another word for being the last man standing. And when you were the last man standing, you stood alone. The mare's hooves beat a steady rhythm against the packed earth, and Tom settled into the familiar motion of the saddle. Somewhere far ahead, another town waited, another name, another chance to be quiet, peaceful, forgotten. And somewhere behind him, or maybe ahead, or to either side, another young gun was strapping on his pistol and dreaming of glory, of being the man who finally outdrew the legend. Tom touched the grips of his twin Colts and kept riding into the darkness, carrying the weight of 5 more ghosts and the knowledge that the fastest gun in the West was just another way of saying the loneliest man alive. But at least, he thought, for 15 years he'd had peace. For 15 years he'd been just Tom the bartender, polishing glasses and pouring drinks, watching other men live their lives while he hid from his own. Maybe that was worth something. Maybe that was enough. The stars came out overhead, brilliant and cold and indifferent. Tom rode on, and redemption disappeared behind him like a dream upon waking, real for a moment, then gone, leaving only the faint echo of memory and the bitter taste of regret. He'd killed 5 men today, and he'd done it with the casual efficiency of breathing. That's what frightened him most, not that he still could, but that it had felt like coming home. The devil's disciple rode north through the Texas night, and behind him the dead slept in unmarked graves, and ahead of him the living waited with guns and glory in their eyes, and above him the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small tragedies of men who lived and died by the speed of their hands and the coldness of their hearts. And in the Silver Dollar Saloon, Martha Henderson swept up the broken glass and scrubbed the blood from the floor. And when she was done, she poured herself a glass of that expensive Kentucky bourbon and drank a toast to the quiet bartender who'd been so much more and so much less than anyone had known. "Safe travels, Tom," she whispered to the empty room. "Wherever you land." But Tom couldn't hear her. He was already miles away, riding toward another sunrise, another town, another name, and the eternal burden of being the fastest gun in a world where being fast only meant you got to die last.